Technology is reshaping the defense industry. So which companies are leading that charge? Today on Ticker Take, we'll speak to a former Special Forces officer turned investor about the stocks of 4 companies that are worth knowing about. Plus, we'll tell you about some private companies that could be next in this industry to go public through an IPO. So hit that subscribe button and let's get started. This is Ticker Take. Hey, good to see you. Caroline's off today. Listen, if you're a Ticker Take regular, you'll know we've covered the defense industry. The stocks in that sector have been hot. We've had conflicts around the world, from the Middle East to Ukraine. You've got NATO countries that have committed to spending more money, and obviously investors have taken note of that. But there's another factor, which is that technology is changing the way warfare plays out around the world. So we wanted to talk to an expert investor, not only in cutting-edge companies, but someone who has on-the-ground military experience, because at the end of the day, when you're on the battlefield, you've got to know if the technology that everybody's talking about will actually work effectively. So, against that backdrop, let's introduce you to today's guest. It's Glenn Cowan. He's the venture investor and founder of 19. All right, Glenn, thanks very much for joining us. Great to see you.
Great to see you. It's been a while since our last interview.
Yeah, and a lot has changed, including all this military spending that we've been hearing about, which is driving a lot of stocks. Can you just set the stage for us on what the driving force is there?
Yeah, there has been a seismic shift in the industry, and defense investing, the world geostrategic conflict, our alliances are shifting, and the way companies are building and the technology that is fueling how we win as Western democracies against our adversaries has done this seismic shift. No more evidence than what we're seeing coming out of the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, where we're seeing early stage, innovative, technological cycles of producing an effects-based ability to deliver a battlefield effect, working its way back into the garages, labs, and sort of ecosystem of this early stage innovation, whereby you're seeing the ROI on conflict shift. And so, one of the key drivers from a business perspective and from a capital perspective is, the traditional defense industrial base, where 5 big primes were looking at cost plus contracts and the build of exquisite systems to drag out over decades, where they can make money selling big RFPs to the Pentagon, has completely shifted, where flash to bang, from delivery of effect on the battlefield to the build of a new technology in the Ukraine, is about 3 weeks. It's venture backed, it's happening with rapid iteration and rapid prototyping, and you're seeing the type of effect whereby a $5,000 unmanned system can take out a $5 or $6 million main battle tank. And that has completely shifted the way in which we're looking to sort of build for future conflict. And what's really driving the next bound is this sort of potential setup for an Indo-Pacific conflict where an aggressive China challenges the existing balance of power in the world.
It's obviously a big concern, and when it comes to the specifics on the ground, we were mentioning earlier your own unique military experience dealing with conflicts and hostage situations around the world, and multiple tours in Afghanistan. So you had a lot of real-world experience when technology is deployed. What were some of the biggest lessons that you learned that are worth being aware of today?
I was part of a special mission unit, so a very high, sort of high caliber, high quality special operations force here in Canada. There was nothing special about the unit and what we did other than we did the basics really well, but we received these really high profile, high risk strategic missions for the government of Canada. And whether it was, supporting hostage recovery in Africa or combat operations in Afghanistan or more sensitive sort of collection operations, there was one common theme in that a emerging disruptive technology or multiple technology stacks, when fused together to create a capability, were always involved in mission success. And so when you look at the private markets, when you look at the venture ecosystem, when you look at the startup community, and you sort of think sort of Y Combinator, a unit like my organization was like, I kind of, I would say this when I was raising my first fund. I sort of called it like a Y Combinator on steroids, because we had all the makings of this like entrepreneurial mindset with a supreme mission focus, and it mirrors our entire thesis around venture in terms of deploying scarce resources in high risk, high reward environments. And so that was kind of the eureka moment towards building and getting into venture and seeing how venture as a asset class can help drive this entire market forward and then really become a tool of national security. And so, that's where the intersection of special operations and the experiences I had really shaped our investment thesis and really shaped why and how, my firm now is sort of one of one in Canada.
And so, going back to some of the other things you said, at the end of the day, if people are trying to figure out the companies that are going to be leading on the technology side, the reason we're talking about some smaller, more startup-like businesses versus the biggest of the big in defense, it's the same thing we talk about with sort of the Silicon Valley effect with traditional businesses?
It's 100% the Silicon Valley effect. And Silicon Valley has its roots in supporting national security operations, like right back to, early intelligence, CIA-driven sort of operations and building for the creation of what became the American defense industrial base. And what we have found through our own thesis, through our own portfolio, and then just watching, whether we're involved or not, some of the really successful companies that we'll talk about, the ones that are doing it right are building capability and not getting hyper-focused on just a widget.
All right. Well, against that backdrop, we're going to talk about some of those stocks of businesses that Glenn and others are watching. We're also going to give you an early snapshot of some of the private companies that, if they chose to go public through an IPO, would definitely be worth watching. As always, a friendly reminder, this is not financial advice. Let's get to those stocks now. Okay, stock number one, AeroVironment. Glenn, tell us a little bit more about this one.
I love AeroVironment because it really, in my experience, took me through my entire venture journey. AeroVironment is trading on the NASDAQ. It's a $12 billion market cap. They're well known for manufacturing unmanned drones or unmanned aerial systems, namely the Switchblade and the Puma. Switchblade, they got big contracts with the US Pentagon to deploy the Switchblade, which is a loitering munition in support of the Ukrainians as they're fighting fighting in eastern Ukraine. What I love about AeroVironment is I watched Tomahawk Robotics, which was one of my first venture investments. Tomahawk manufactured a common command and control system for an operator to be able to control multiple drones, air, land, and sea on a common pane of glass with a common command and control operating system. We exited, we had a full exit from our Tomahawk position and we sold to AeroVironment. Since that transaction, which I'm holding still in my personal account, we've seen AeroVironment almost triple. It's trading anywhere between $240, $280. Like I said, $12 billion market cap, and there's no signs of slowing down.
All right, stock number two, Palantir, which, Glenn, we've probably talked about Palantir as much as any other company this year on Ticker Take, but what is your take on Palantir?
Palantir is the OG Neoprime 2.0. New theme that is really seeing the disruption in what I would call the Uber moment in the defense is the traditional five primes being challenged by venture-backed startups.
And the five primes are the big defense companies.
Big publicly traded defense companies that you've probably covered on the show. Like I said, Palantir is the OG, venture-backed by some of the biggest Silicon Valley funds. And when you look at what Palantir does, one of the common questions is, I don't even know what Palantir does because they kind of touch everything. It's a software-enabled, data-driven intelligence platform that was able to pull massive amounts of analytical data to do one thing, which was deliver effects. And the effect that Palantir delivers is quality intelligence that leads to decisions. Whether that's in a national security intelligence community, whether that's on the battlefield helping target a special operations force or large conventional military, or being applied to their commercial business, which they have a lot of, the decision quality information that the Palantir data set delivers for that decision maker is that effect type topic that I mentioned. I think Palantir right now is by market cap north of $350 billion, and in the defense world, they have bypassed all the primes as the leading largest company by market cap. Palantir has really become the operating system for these types of enterprise to drive decision quality information and decision making.
Okay, stock number 3, Kraken Robotics. Glenn, tell us a little bit more about this one.
Unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, drones gaining a lot of attention, a lot of traction, becoming mainstream in a lot of discussions. That type of technology is having the same sort of play in all the different environments, and Kraken is a Canadian leader out of Newfoundland addressing maritime unmanned subsurface vehicles, really focusing on underwater robots, sonar, subsea robotics. Kraken, like I said, is one of the leading Canadian publicly listed companies, proving that defense and venture-backed or early stage companies is so much more than just an American phenomenon. Serving NATO and leading sort of offshore energy customers really gives them their dual use flavor. Dual use being supporting military and sort of more government national security focus, but still a big application to pull revenue from commercial large enterprise, in this case, anything that has to do with stuff underwater. We're going to see a significant increase in the sea and the subsea as a key domain that will be fought over, because it's no longer just about manned submarines, which are making news today, but it's also about underwater sea cabling, fiber optics, these underwater unmanned military vehicles. But the cool thing about robots is as they're out there swimming around the ocean, they can collect a ton of other data that's relevant for other industries. So, what these vehicles are collecting can be then built into revenue streams for a whole host of other industries based on what they're looking at.
And stock number 4, Voyager. Now, this is a recent IPO story, correct?
Yeah, just IPO'd a couple months ago.
And tell us a little bit more about what they're all about.
So we'd be remiss to not talk about space as a new domain in the national security, dual use, and military sector. So Voyager Technologies, again, IPO'd at a $1.9 billion valuation. Heavily venture-backed. A lot of the early investors in Voyager are co-investors with 1.9. Missed that boat early, but on IPO, the stock jumped 82% on the first day of trading. Dual use, obviously, on the creation of launch space infrastructure with their Starlab, and increase of defense systems. Again, further proving that space, the creation of Space Force, is truly, to quote, the next frontier, is a critical environment that we need to be thinking about from a defense and national security perspective. I think it's further proof that early stage venture-backed companies that are now servicing a more democratized market like space, where traditionally government held the key if you wanted to get to space, we're now seeing that disruption as part of that 180 seismic shift, because now we have this democratized platform of being able to access and new environments and new opportunities that used to only be reserved for the monopoly of government organizations. Majority of revenue from Voyager comes from about 25% of the revenue, I believe, comes from NASA.
Okay, so definitely 4 stocks there to watch as the industry continues to evolve. There are a lot of private companies to watch as well. So let's get into 5 companies now that are private but could be worth watching depending on the IPO market going forward. Private company number 1, Anduril. Now, this is the brainchild of Palmer Luckey, who's well known in the gaming industry. Everybody's been talking about this company. How come?
Because they're doing it right. The team that Palmer has assembled, the funding that they've assembled, the way that they've approached creating disruption in the defense sector is really sort of a beacon for other early stage companies and other early stage venture capitalists. Anduril is very quickly becoming a Neoprime 2.0, this software-enabled defense giant. Again, challenging the traditional primes who are heavily focused on hardware. Anduril is building a complete software layer, and their company focuses around their lattice, which, think of that as kind of like Palantir was software enabled. Think of this as sort of the brain connected layer that is going to connect global, like the systems of the future that the US DoD and our allies will want.
Which seems pretty important.
Super important. And so it's around, using software and building a software layer that other early stage hardware can plug into. So you're seeing Anduril sort of touch every aspect of the defense ecosystem. Again, smart, driven, highly capable team, very strategic capital, raising a lot of money, just closed another round at $30 billion valuation. And I believe, Palmer's made no qualms about the fact that they will be going public. The question now is when, and I would suggest and argue and be watching very closely for the Anduril IPO as a trigger that starts to see a waterfall of other defense companies start to look at the IPO market as investors are going to be looking for liquidity. Now, from a timing perspective, we're in August of 2025. I would target between now and November of 2026, when we have the US midterms, as a key window to start watching for defense and dual use companies leading the next wave of really attractive IPOs.
Private company number 2 to watch, Forterra.
I love Forterra, a very aggressive company in the world of ground autonomy. So we hear, again, a lot about drones that fly. We talked about Kraken. Forterra is now countering and dealing with, the self-driving vehicle fleets of the military. Again, hyper software enabled with traditional small to large ground-based autonomy. Why I think Forterra is critically important is because as robots start doing a lot more of the fighting and a lot more of the dull, dirty, dangerous work, we're going to see the requirement for the removal of soldiers from the battlefield and the autonomy of these vehicles doing a lot of the work for the soldier. And just look at the casualty rates coming out of the Ukraine. With that conflict, it's turning in very quickly to a war of attrition. We can transfer all of that dull, dirty, dangerous work to this backbone workhorse, which is ground autonomy.
Private company number 3, SpaceX.
Who knows what Elon Musk is going to do, but I would not bet against Elon Musk. In a world where we have seen space launch democratize, we're now seeing the ability for private companies to integrate with other private companies and get a whole lot of stuff into space. And again, in a world where we've seen a government-dominated monopoly. So we're seeing that democratization, and SpaceX now accounts for the majority of launch happening globally. Then layer on the satellite constellations and the Starlink sort of aspect. A really critical aspect of our day-to-day life is the satellite network and everything that we take for granted through that Starlink constellation. And so I would just continue to watch and see. Evidence Tesla as their ability to take a company public and watch what Tesla has done. And so we'll see what Elon might do, but I would be watching for a SpaceX IPO.
Private company number 4, Shield AI.
We've been doing a lot of talking about autonomy. Shield AI is one of the leaders in airborne autonomy, having sort of their flagship win and milestone of being able to take an F-16 and make it autonomous. Most people know Shield AI for their VBAT drone, which is one of the leading munition systems for sort of one-way attack munitions that the U.S. is getting behind. But really, I think the play with Shield AI is airborne autonomy. Again, going back to Anduril, we're seeing a lot of focus on the collaborative combat aircraft package. Shield AI, probably integrating with them on those types of large projects or going it alone as a competitor. But basically, we're starting to see autonomous fighter aircraft become key on the battlefield.
And private company number 5 to watch, Epirus. Tell us more about Epirus.
If there's anything that should be keeping people up at night, it's drone swarms, and it's the ability for nefarious drone activity being launched against targets. We're seeing drones and airborne attack in a conflict zone really be a deciding force multiplier for combat operations. Epirus is the manufacturer of a counter UAS system or a counter drone technology that uses directed energy to basically fry the circuit boards of drones, and in an environment where we're always trying to one up the defeat mechanism. Right. Epirus is just using directed energy to sort of attack with energy to knock these systems out of the sky. In our fund, we really like counter-drone. We're invested in Canadian-based North Vector Dynamics and a U.S. drone detection company called Hidden Level. Epirus is also in the portfolio in another holding, still private, but really seeing the ability and the growth of this layered defense for how Western societies are going to now deal with incoming drone swarms. And so huge commercial application with a company like Epirus. Think deployments at stadiums, airports, around critical infrastructure where you don't have the luxury, given a densely populated urban center, to be firing a kinetic interceptor or missile. Use of energy and a directed energy capability is key. Again, heavily backed by strategic investors, a great team, great go-to-market, and no shortage of drones that need to be taken out of the sky.
All right, that is our list of defense tech companies. Our thanks to Glenn Cowan. If you'd like to learn more about Glenn or his firm 19, we've got information in our description, where we also have other ways that you can connect with us, from our free investing newsletter to all of our podcast episodes. And if you're a fan of Ticker Take, don't forget to subscribe and let others know as well. We're hoping to reach our subscriber goal of 25,000 subscribers this year. All right, that's it for this week. Thanks very much. We'll see you next time.